Paul, thank you very much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk with you. Can you take a moment to just quickly introduce yourself and talk about what you do?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the COO of the investment business at Willis Towers Watson. I've only been in the role for just over 13 months or so now, but my journey is a little bit longer than that. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years. I spent the last 13 years at Willis Towers Watson. Prior to that, I was running a multi-manager business with a couple of ex-colleagues from Deutsche Asset Management. We set up our own business in Oxford with a bunch of Oxford colleges. Even had a little office in Christchurch College where Harry Potter was filmed, for anybody who remembers Harry Potter. And then prior to that, I was at Deutsche for almost 10 years as well. So I think you knit that all together, you get to somewhere about 29 years. Always been mainly on the operational side. And therefore, my evolution to being COO is probably the fulfillment of, that journey for me along the path.
The first question I ask all of our guests is talk to me about the very first time you interacted with AI, however you define AI.
um, well, probably slightly vicariously in some respects. My wife is way more technology focused than me. She'd been using AI and playing around with it for longer. Actually, my brother-in-law worked at Google. He came from a software development firm before that, and there he's actually working building out AI movies. So she'd always been kind of quite interested in it. I kind of would be looking at seeing what she was doing. So I'm going to guess at some point one evening when, 2 or 3 years ago, she was like, hey, this AI stuff's pretty cool. She got me kind of playing with it. When I actually kind of got brave and started using it for myself, probably around about 18 months ago when I was asked to join the AI working group at Willis Towers Watson within our segment. I kind of figured if you're going to be on a group like that, you probably should know how some of this stuff works as well. So picked it up and started playing with it, same as everybody else, ChatGPT to start with. And then, from there, we've evolved a little bit.
From what I understand about you, Paul, technology doesn't come naturally to you.
Yeah,
Uh,
you could say.
Can you talk about why you call yourself a technophobe and how your relationship with technology has changed over the years?
Maybe part laziness. When you've got a partner who's actually strong in these things, his jobs, her jobs, that kind of thing, you let her take the lead on it. But even before that, I recognize and I've known for a long time that I'm more of a creative individual. The stuff that I did when I was at school, when I was at university, probably more on the creative side. So I never find technology and technical kind of stuff all that good. Although I do push myself from time to time to try and do DIY at home. Doesn't always work out well, but it kind of like I'm a willing trier. But I guess you look at the age that I am and things. I'm 52 right now. I grew up in an era where technology wasn't a thing. I was pre-dot-com boom and technology boom. So we didn't have a computer when I was growing up. I think the first time I used a computer was maybe 12, 13 to play some basic games on at school. We had a computer lab, which was 3 BBC micros, huge, great boxy things that were in your, taking up all the space. If you could actually get it to connect and print something off, you'd done a pretty decent job. It just didn't, I never got the energy and the excitement for it. And even then when, going to university, we didn't have to do much in the way, it was all written notes at the time in the lectures. And then at the end, maybe they'd ask us to do an assignment using a word processor in the computer lab. Nobody had, individual PCs and things. 1996, I started. And, then it was a desktop underneath your desk, banging your knee on the thing. We used programs for accounting software. We wouldn't really start using things like email even until the invention of Windows 98. So I'm not like these modern people in the industry now and in society. My kids, for example, virtually born with a tablet in their hands. So it's kind of happened to me rather than something I've caught the wave of. And I think, that's challenging. You see people around you who are a lot faster and agile. And yet now in the position I'm in right now, it's my responsibility. Technology and also the evolution of our AI strategy sits firmly and squarely with me. I'm kind of interested in what's happening and I pick up on the themes, but how it works under the bonnet and under the hood of it just doesn't float my boat in the same way.
When WTW tasked you with joining this working group and developing an AI strategy, I guess why you? Why did they say, "Oh, Paul, we need Paul in this initiative"?
I think it goes a little bit with the territory, right? The COO type role, there are different COOs out there. Some people are more heavily on the operations side. You'll get some where it even spans into things like HR as well. In the investments business at WTW, I often joke that it's either my responsibility or it's my fault. That's how I describe my job. So it's pretty much anything and everything. When you look at the other leaders around the table, where they're focused on the client side of things, or they're focused on the content side of stuff, or portfolio management business, then someone's got to pick up the slack when it comes to anything that's relevant to technology. Now, I probably didn't do myself any favors by the fact that I actually led a technology project a few years ago within the investment business, where we basically took out the old kitchen and put a new one in terms of our fund management technology stack. So maybe they kind of thought I was kind of pretty keen on this stuff. I'm pretty good at it. So unfortunately, yeah, if you're the COO in the investment business at Willis Towers Watson, then you are basically the person who's going to be told, okay, AI, we need to get on board with that. And Paul, can you come up with a strategy? So definitely not picked for my skills or for my knowledge around that. Maybe my enthusiasm, maybe that. But definitely, I think it just is part of the job.
Do you feel like you're representative of many COOs in the space that are kind of faced with this transformation?
Could be. Yeah, I mean, if you think about, ages and kind of, seniority and things like that, then somebody in their kind of 40s to 50s, maybe at that kind of level where they are in the kind of same positions as me. And if they are, then they've had a similar technology journey, no doubt, right? So unless they are the people who've gone down more that technical route and, maybe kind of started on the technology side and then morphed over onto the operations side, there's probably lots of people like me, I would expect, who equally, it's part of the job. It goes with the territory. We all work in uncertainty and, actually figuring that out. When I started the technology project I talked about, I wasn't a technology guy at all. My boss at the time kind of joked after a while that he said, you're actually sounding more like a technology guy than the technology guys. So I pick things up, right? And that's what we have to do, right? We have to navigate the uncertainty. We have to kind of figure out what's right to do. And my skills are not necessarily about the actual ins and outs of the technology, but more framing the vision, articulating the vision, if you like, and putting people around me to actually build out that strategy. That's one of the things I bring to the party. And I would imagine there's a lot of people like me. Doesn't mean that it doesn't come with a degree of fear about it as well, because it's an area where there are people way more qualified than you. When I kind of met you guys and spoke at the writer conference not too long ago, that was awful, right? Filled with CTOs, CIOs in there, and it's like, I'm going to talk about AI to a bunch of people who know way more about it than me. But you push yourselves in those ways, you got to get through it.
They know way more about the technology than you, but not about like what business processes
Yeah.
need to be augmented with the technology. And that's where folks like you come in, right?
I agree. And I think that's where the kind of, if you like, the skill comes in, right? You've got to be able to kind of see the problem and also see the potential solution. I can't architect exactly what the solution is going to be in terms of the specific of the technology, but I can set the vision of where we need to get to this. I think about the role of a COO like this. You've got foundations in a business and they need to be strong, because we're going to layer on new clients, new products, new geographies, new segments, other bits and pieces, and that's going to bring complexity with it. If we don't have the right foundations in our business first and foremost, then that business is going to come toppling over at some point, or at least it's going to be, parts of it maybe kind of falling off and things. I have to understand where we're going from the broader business strategy, and then set the foundational strategies around technology, around data, and that, AI sits firmly, squarely in the middle of both of those things. It's having that vision to be able to see where we're trying to get to and how we need to get there and who I need to mobilize around it, and then hope that those people are damn good to be able to then figure out the intricacies of it along the way as well.
What are some of the hurdles that you're, experiencing, maybe that you didn't anticipate as you started on this AI strategy?
Budget is always an interesting one, right? We're always compressed and challenged on those things. And this seems like a problem that you could throw an awful lot of money at, and there just isn't necessarily the money there to throw at it in the biggest way. So where do you start is often one of my kind of like challenges in this thing. And I think there are different competitions as well then for, what is it, stuff that's going to be important for clients, or should we be doing things that are important for our shareholders, or should we be doing things that are important for our colleagues? I actually started with asking people. I kind of surveyed around and said, where should we be putting our dollars around this? And the overriding answer that came back was that colleagues wanted things that would help them do their jobs better, things that make them more efficient. Which again, from a COO point of view, that's a great word to say in front of me. Efficiency is partly what I'm about as well. The where to start is a little bit of a challenge. We haven't experienced quite some of the industry challenges that I know go on, the tension between the technology side versus the business side. We're not quite in that position, fortunately. May change, but for the moment, it's kind of, it seems to be kind of an even keel. I think that's one of the things to kind of also navigate. If you'd have said to me 10 years ago, this is coming and you need to prepare yourself for it, then we'd have made sure that we'd have done a whole data strategy. We'd got all of our data really kind of clean and sorted. We'd have mapped all of our processes. We'd have kind of really understood that and done a lot of process re-engineering. And I think one of the challenges as we start going into this now is you're almost playing catch up. Because for me, AI, and as we now look into agentic AI, really demands that you've got a full command of not just your processes, but also the data that's associated with that as well. So if your ambition is to use that stuff and you've not got those things lined up in an orderly fashion already, then that's a challenge as well. Where do I start? Which bit of data is ready? How do I move forward from there?
So you are in the investment group at WTW, but there are teams that are using AI for other things. How are you working together to kind of break down data silos, for example? I'm sure that there are ways that not necessarily client data, but definitely organizational data that needs to be shared across the organization, and you can use AI in a more unified way.
Well, you'd be surprised. We're an organization that I think has got a lot of almost siloed data.
Mm-hmm.
Investments, and then you've got other parts of WTW, like say our corporate and risk and broking. It's very different sets of data that we need. They're interested in policies and renewals and premiums and stuff around kind of like measuring that risk. Whereas I'm talking about what's happening in the S&P right now, or what's kind of going on from our kind of managers that we're investing in. It's very different languages that we speak in a broad suite of services. So that challenge is less the same. I think the bigger one for us is that you get the C-suite at the very top saying, AI, really important, get involved in it, go do stuff, but reinvent the wheel. don't kind of do the same thing as somebody else in another business is doing. But we're very separate businesses in many ways. And so having to kind of try and pull together and create a database of all of the initiatives that we're all working on in order to be able to try and make sure, hey, am I going to do something that somebody else has already invented? That's the way in which we're trying to kind of be efficient about it. Although I will say that even then, the use case specific might be, very different to even my colleagues in retirement who are the closest to us. So we might want to use the same technology like Writer, but the way in which somebody in retirement or in EX or in marketing is actually using it, it may on the surface seem similar, but there'll be nuances between them, means we can't necessarily benefit from the efficiencies of that one-stop approach.
Are you engaging, end users, AI champions as you build out these solutions, or how are you getting to the endpoint?
Trying to, I think, one of the things I learned from the technology projects I did before was that change is a big thing. And, we often think about projects and we get nice project plans and, it's all very nicely mapped out and this will happen at this date and so on and so forth. But you got to take people on the journey as well. When you're doing things that are different, it can be scary for them, exciting at the same time as well. But if you forget that hearts and minds aspect of things, then I think it's a miss. Embedding change champions within the business and getting people who are authentic and genuinely excited about it is helpful. it also provides then a pivot for people to or an anchor for people to kind of go back to within their teams to ask questions. And I think it also helps to spread knowledge as well, right, by sharing that as well. So we've recently created within investments an AI working group as well. That group is a cross section of people globally and across the different functions within investments, and they're going to act as both the kind of the push and the pull. So they will be hoovering up people's ideas and trying to channel those, and also screen those, and then kind of prioritize those as we go through them. And obviously, then as we roll things out, when we've worked through a use case, they're then going to be the people who are standing up doing the training, and then holding people's hands through it as well. So I see that as a really important part of trying to, one, be efficient, trying to make sure that not everybody's doing their own thing, that we're getting the best ideas coming through, we get the biggest bang for buck. But also then when it comes to rollout, trying to maximize the efficiency of that and maximize also the adoption as well.
Where are you at? You don't have to give me specifics, but in terms of that journey toward rollout, toward adoption, are you nascent stages? Where are we?
100% at the nascent side of things. So, like I said, I surveyed people last year and said, what do you want? What do you think? So our 2024 strategy was very much about trying to bring the early kind of stages of AI to people and give them a taste for stuff. That revolved around using Writer a bit, using Microsoft Copilots a bit in some pockets as well. And that was about it, right? That was a starter for 10. This year, as I look into 2025, we want to go deeper across that, and maybe also think more deeply about the use of Writer, particularly with the agentic stuff coming out as well. And we're also thinking about how we might build some of our own AI tools, maybe data extraction as an obvious one. We work with a lot of prospectuses, memorandums, and all of that kind of stuff, where a lot of data that we have to find. So unstructured data that somebody has to look through. Well, AI should be able to help us with that. And then going back to the point about cleaning up your data, if we can, do the two things at the same time, that's a win-win for us. So that's, to me, quite nascent in itself. You may, compared to other organizations, go, no, you're wrong. That's actually quite progressive. But I don't feel it is. I feel like we've got around about 13% of the investments population using AI in a way in which we've given them the tools. That doesn't mean they're not using it personally, or it doesn't mean that they're not, doing a little bit of kind of like ChatGPT or, Copilot's kind of searches and things as well. But in terms of tools we've rolled out to people, 13%. My goal for this year is to get that up to 30%. But my also goal is, and this is maybe it's a learning from last year, is I think we underestimated how much education we can also be bringing people, not waiting to roll out the tool and say, hey, here's a new tool for you to use. Now go learn how to use it. But trying to kind of get people comfortable with using AI and thinking about AI and think about how they embed that in their daily lives. That for me is also kind of important. So we talk about this year bringing the kind of the AI to the people, but also bringing the people to the AI as well. And that training part is really that people to the AI.
Yeah, it is a mindset shift. I would say 5 years ago, when I didn't use AI, I would just go into work and plan out, all right, so what are my steps here? What are the things that I'm going to do? And now when I go into projects, I'm thinking, how am I going to be using AI? What are the pieces of data that I want to feed to AI to accomplish this?
Totally. I think you're so right. And even, I've been thinking to myself, in a world where we're more remote workers, I'm sat at home, you may be sat at home right now as well. We do that a lot more than we did do. I am an advocate of working in the office when it makes sense to do so. I live a long way from our office. So, for me, going in and having face-to-face meetings is important, but going in and doing Teams calls and stuff like that's a waste of my time. But the thing that I'm going to miss if I'm sat in my space here every day is that moment when sometimes you just lean to the person next to you and go, hey, let me just check this with you, or you just ask a question, or does this sound all right? Occasionally you're more likely to do that when you're sat next to somebody. What we're doing when we're sat in our offices right now is our brains are making, calculated decisions. Everything that I'm saying to you right now, my brain is, vetting it that nanosecond before it comes out my mouth, I hope. You miss that kind of soundboarding bit. And I've been thinking about that and thinking, I could turn to the wall right now and say, hey, wall, what do you think? But maybe actually what I can do is use AI to ask what it thinks and soundboard stuff for me. I'll give you an example. I've recently started taking presentations that I've put together. And then when I've put that presentation together, I will use AI to either say to me, what do you think this presentation is about? So I don't tell it what the subject matter is. I'll just say, what do you think it's about? And obviously, if it comes back and says to me, something that resonates with what the messaging was, then, that's useful information. I'll sometimes then give it the actual title and then say, how well aligned do you think the messaging in this presentation is with that? But the bit that's really good for the soundboarding then is I then say, here's the audience that I'm going to be presenting this to or talking to this to. Can you think of some challenging questions I might get? Now, normally it'll throw up, 5, say, suggestions on that. 3 of them, because my brain had already thought of them, were already ones I'd already thought of those. I didn't need the AI to do that. But maybe number 4 is one where, okay, I hadn't thought of that, but I know the answer straight away. So that's good. I've, prepped on that side of things. And the 5th one's going to be one that I hadn't even thought of at all. And I now need to go and do some work on, and it's better preparing me for that. I'm just using it in that sense as a kind of check to see if I've got blind spots of some sort somewhere. And I think that's, again, it's mindset, right? How do you go from, I never used to do that, to now I do that all the time? And, you just got to find your way, force yourself if you like. But that's where I think when people look at adoption, it's getting that muscle memory in there. And it's fine if you put a tool in front of somebody where I say, we're going to automate cash reconciliations using AI, that's somebody's job. My job doesn't work like that. My job's more varied than that. So I need to work harder, perhaps, to therefore embed it and get the maximum use out of it.
What is the ideal state as far as adoption is concerned? Where, you said you want to get to a certain percentage, but really, what does that workplace look like to you?
I'd love to kind of think about us, being an AI first, AI led kind of organization. But I wonder whether that's a little bit of a dream or, that's a longer term kind of plan, because I think you really need to think about what the future of the business looks like in order to be able to kind of map how you kind of do the AI towards that. If I think that in 10 years' time, the only thing we're going to do is use AI on a daily basis, then the people that I need to hire in the future need to come on day one very conversant with that. Right now, you've got people like me and people in the organization who are learning the AI tools, but I don't want them to have to kind of keep coming in and learning, right? So I need to kind of think about how we're going to recruit and where we're going to recruit from. Are we going to have to change the graduate programs that we have today or the universities that we engage with? And that's a longer term play, which kind of stems from thinking really about who you are, what you're going to be, and how your client base is going to be in the future. I'd love to tell you that we have that vision kind of clearly mapped out, but, I think that's work that we need to do. In the meantime, as we, and others like us, I'm sure, face pressures in the market to be, efficient, I think where I'm going to see AI for me working is how can we take everything that we think is good work product and make it better work product? And how can we do everything that we think is, time consumptive and make it less time consumptive? So 5 years from now, something that is making us smarter than we already think we're pretty smart already, but think using AI to make us even smarter. Our research guys are always coming up with new ideas of new products that we could work on and build for ourselves or with managers that we work with in the industry. But they do that based on, hey, I've got an idea. Now let's go find some demand to actually kind of satisfy that. Well, what if you flip that round the other way? What if you had AI screening and scanning the market for you, looking at flows, looking at, sentiment, looking at ideas that are coming out there, trying to kind of like pick up, signals in the market and suggesting, hey, this is the market for this particular product if you wanted to launch it. It's a different mindset, a different way of shifting the way in which we would do product development. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that we ended up that way. Definitely think that on the more operations and process side of things, though, if we've not kind of embedded that across everything that we do, I've set a goal this year for us to literally map out every single process that we do across both operations and the business side of things as well, so that we can then start looking at how we would then use agentic AI, for example, to help us in actually further making those efficient. And that's going to have big impacts, right? A lot of people have been talking, and we're no different, with shifting our workforces, more mobile workforces. Are we going to push stuff to kind of offshore locations? And we've been doing that, and we're even set targets to do so. But maybe the challenge is going to be, do you even need to push that role offshore in the first place? If AI could actually just do the task instead, that's going to be a role or a person that we're not now going to hire in that offshore location, or capacity that we can create within the onshore location to do more client servicing. So that's going to have quite an impact if that really plays out in that way, in the way in which we think about the decisioning between onshore, offshore, or AI as a third variable in there.
So the work shifts to more client service as opposed to that back office task work. What do you think would happen if you shift more people toward client service? I mean, what's the impact there for clients ultimately?
More attentiveness from us is going to be kind of what clients can expect. But what I don't want to do is just do the same stuff with clients that we're doing with them right now. I think we really need to leverage then the AI and the technology that's going to be emerging to really create a richer set of interactions with those clients, really kind of tailoring advice, really kind of creating more bespoking. So right now, bespoke is the absolute enemy of me, who as the COO wants to have lots of kind of like, homogenous processes that we can be really efficient around. But look, if I can kind of give you the bespoke with no extra effort or limited extra effort, no problem at all. So I think the relationship in terms of then the way in which we interact with those clients, it's not just going to be about doing more the same. It's going to be doing more, but doing it differently.
How has your leadership changed in the face of this, or has it? Is it validating certain lessons that you've learned about leadership, or is it challenging it?
I think back to the kind of what is the difference between leadership and management? And the real kind of difference, as I see it, is about kind of setting the vision and kind of articulating the vision. There are other things as well, but that's one that really kind of sticks out for me and resonates with me and goes back to, the very start of the conversation. So I'm a technophobe. I'm not really kind of like into all of this stuff. It doesn't, excite me as a native kind of thing. But it's my responsibility to go and understand some of this stuff, or at least understand the direction of travel and get a kind of a sense for how this might fit with us, and then to be able to sell that vision. So that's, part of, I think, where the responsibility on leadership is to try and create that vision and create the enthusiasm around it, mobilize people around it. Obviously, we have conversations around how much budget, we talked about that before. How much budget do we put around this? We had a session with our leadership team last week, actually. I surveyed them pre-meeting as to what their kind of appetite for investment in, resources around AI was. Then I got an expert from a consultant to come and talk to them about the market context, which I think frightened the hell out of them a little bit. And then we had a discussion around it. I forced people to go into two rooms, and you were either in the spend more room or you were in the kind of spend what we're spending right now room, regardless of your own personal preference. They debated that, and then we kind of played the answers back to each other. And then in a kind of more free format, we discussed then, the pros and the cons of both of the arguments. And then people voted again. And it was interesting how many people had changed their vote from pre-meeting to towards the end of it.
First, I'm curious what the change of perception was that got people to change their mind, or an expectation that was changed.
There's nothing quite as powerful as then bringing in somebody who's a recognized expert from outside to put in front of a group of people to open their mindsets up a little bit. You could call it manipulation if you like, but it's my way of therefore trying to say, hey, I told you so, but I don't need to say I told you so because they already know. But it just is a way of reinforcing and reaffirming things by doing it that way around. You need to sometimes create an environment like that and create a more strategic, workshopy type of kind of scenario if I just say, hey, read this document, you might not read it. If I just tell you something, you might listen and then forget and find other priorities. But when we put that environment that I talked about before together, bring in that external expert, I think it kind of shifts things. I actually introduced my boss to May Habib, the other day, and I think that's been a really powerful conversation as well. She's now, come on, Paul, we need to kind of do more on this, and it's like, I feel like I told you that. But now she meets May, and now she kind of like gets it from an external perspective. Well, hey, here we go. Right now, we've got kind of two people charging up the hill together, and I think that's where I've been trying to navigate a little bit, getting that vision that I've got, but finding ways to then put that spark under other people as well.
Yeah, it seems like partnering with vendors, AI experts. I mean, you were a testament to this too. Is like, I'm not the expert in the room when it comes to this. Let's bring in somebody who knows more about this, because chances are you're not the only person who's experiencing that. What you told me before our interview was a bit of an imposter syndrome moment. What does it take for you to put trust in a vendor to partner with them that way, or a consultant?
I really look for people who are first and foremost looking to kind of like understand your problems and then help you be better. They'll get paid on the back of that, I'm sure, at some point in time. But when you're coming in trying to actually sell stuff to me, first of all, it's a short conversation. So I always am more engaged with and more receptive to people who are trying to kind of understand how to understand what my problems are and how to help me to make those problems better. That's the basic tenet of things. I told a story at the writer conference of one of your developers who, in his weekend, kind of had a thought about how we could do things differently, made the changes, sent us a little video, and showed us how we could kind of improve some of the kind of the use cases that we have and how we work with them. Well, that just speaks volumes to me about firstly that individual, but then if that's the culture then of that organization, now you're working with somebody who genuinely wants to see you do better. And as I say, when you're working with vendors, everybody will do well out of this eventually, right? The contract will be the contract and people will get paid, but you're likely to get more money out of it if from an organization that feels like you're genuinely kind of trying to put making them better first before profit and profitability.
If you travel back to your pre-AI self, or even further back, what advice would you give yourself?
Sort your data out, sort your processes out, and then kind of look at the technology side of things. Look, this was a lesson that I learned from the technology project I talked about before. I actually joined that project some way into it, and I assumed that a lot of that had been done, only to find out, no, it hadn't. And so again, we had to kind of run in parallel. So it's not like we're repeating the same mistake because I didn't kind of, predict AI and it's all happening, at a pace in front of us and we're having to catch up. If I could go back in time and say, hey, don't start this AI kind of journey just yet, sort out those things first of all, I think that would probably make for a smoother path.
And just talking about you, Paul, what do you think is a through line or a central theme after having this conversation that you maybe have cued into, or that throughout this journey that you've noticed happening?
It sounds a little bit, I don't know whether altruistic is the right word or not, something like that, but you kind of get to a point in life when it's less about kind of me and more about kind of legacy. And, I think about retirement, not on a daily basis, but, occasionally. I'm closer, therefore, to the end of my working career than I am to the start of it. But I'm in a very privileged position right now to be able to potentially actually influence what the future looks like for the next generation, which might include, my children as well. I got 4 boys, 21 through to 13. I would like to see them, in successful careers, whatever they choose to do going forward as well. If people like me are not laying the foundations down now for that next generation to come into the workplace and have, careers, then, I'm doing not just my sons, but other people's sons and daughters a disservice as well, and the people in our organization today. So I feel very much now there's a bit of a, yes, I've got to do the day to day and make sure that, any kind of issues and problems that kind of crop up, as I said, it's either my fault or my responsibility, deal with those things, on a day to day basis. but I have to give some time, some space to envisaging what that future company looks like and making sure that we're putting it and building those foundations good and strong for that. And I think about very much now how AI is going to help and influence that. Sometimes I need to lie down in a darkened room and just take a moment to the enormity of it all. But that's what I'm now constantly thinking about. How can we use AI to help us to create that business for the sustainable for the future? People fear the future of AI and what it might do to their roles and their jobs, and I think that can have an impact on culture. Aligned with the fact that we as an organization just came through a 3-year transformation project as well. So it's got to play on people's minds. Now, I've always positioned it as my view is that AI will always go so far. The human is still going to be involved. And, that should mean that therefore you're more empowered to do more things in your organization. But I need to be able to demonstrate that and show that. Until I can do that, then, there's always going to be that potential fear there. So I think those are two potential, cultural impacts that are not dominating and therefore massively changing the culture, but they're signals that me and the other leaders need to be aware of to navigate and make sure that they don't become dominating factors for us. My process is really to try and make sure that we are adding in an accretive way that's value add at the same time as well. So I would never just go and kind of throw, of the 950 people in investments, I wouldn't just go and throw them, co-pilots kind of licenses just because you can record Teams messages on Teams meetings on there and have the minutes of that. Not everybody's role requires that. They don't do that. So why would I spend the money on that versus, saving something there and then go and do more on the Gen AI side of things with Writer or with somebody else instead? So I think they can put their hands up, but we need to be thoughtful about where we allocate to still.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It was a pleasure speaking with you and hearing your point of view.